The following program contains scenes and language of a frank and explicit nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, and welcome to Film Jitsu, the podcast that wields films like deadly weapons. We are your hosts. I am Jay.
And I am Mike.
On this episode, Mike endures 1990's Pretty Woman, the much-loved romantic comedy about a hooker with a heart of gold and the white knight that saves her. After Mike gives us his thoughts, we'll detail our bottom 5 beloved films, a list of movies that we hate, but seemingly everyone else loves. And for the first time ever, we'll be diving into a little listener feedback before unveiling this year's holiday season selection, which both Mike and I will have to endure. But before all of that, let's roll the trailer for the film Entertainment Weekly's Owen Gleiberman called, quote, Plastic Screwball Soap Opera, Pretty Woman.
When I was a little girl, I would pretend I was a princess trapped in the tower, and then this knight on a white horse would come charging up and rescue me.
Could you tell me how to get to Beverly Hills?
Sure, for $5.
You can't charge me for directions.
I can do anything I want to, baby. I ain't lost.
All right, okay. You have change for 20?
For 20, I'll show you personally. Wow.
They're two people who have no business being together.
Everybody is trying to land him.
Well, I'm not trying to land him. I'm just using him for sex.
Touchstone Pictures presents Richard Gere,
So what happened after? He climbed up the tower and rescued her.
Julia Roberts,
She rescues him right back.
Pretty Woman,
Maybe you guys could, get a house together. Buy some diamonds.
Mike, Pretty Woman is a lot. While it manages to at least try to imbue its story with some kind of statement about classism, what it doesn't talk about, but stresses through its gross cookie-cutter characters, is male white privilege and that women are apparently either whores, bitches, or gold diggers. Or maybe I'm just taking all of this way too seriously and I should just watch Julia Roberts giggle and grin for 2 hours because, let's face it, she's unbelievably radiant in this role. Because apparently that's what many, many people do with this movie. I need to set the stage a little bit. This film grossed $463 million back in 1990. And it was the 5th highest grossing film of all time. So what say you, sir? Were you troubled by the awful ways that these characters act toward one another? Or were you so swept up in the tangles of Julia's wild red hair that you happily ignored Richard Gere's self-satisfied, squinty-eyed misogyny?
Well, you have basically laid out like a hydra of possibilities here for things that I need to address. And I feel like every time I cut off the head of one of these, another one's going to pop up in its place. I don't really know where to start. I mean, I don't know what part of seeing a 22-year-old Julia Roberts in her skimpy bra and undies made you think that this movie was not a good choice for me. That was a bold move. But also, and you kind of mentioned it, a real problem in my life that I've never really addressed publicly, which is that for a very long time, I've always had a thing for redheads.
I see.
But then I had a daughter who turned out to have red hair. And it is like, I will tell you that your interests change immediately when something like that happens, right? It's like, okay, that's over. So that's not a thing anymore. But then I also had never seen Pretty Woman. And so I was like, oh shit. So this redhead is really quite something.
Julia Roberts? What kind of lightning in a bottle did they capture in that moment?
Yeah. And Gary Marshall did her so many favors as a filmmaker in capturing her in authentic moments.
Yes.
I, of course, did a little digging around about how this movie was made and a lot about that. And things like the scene where Richard Gere snaps her fingers in the jewelry case. That was a natural reaction by Julia Roberts. Gary Marshall tickling her feet off camera to get natural laughter out of her when she's watching the television.
Right.
It is not hard to see why this character falls in love with her, because it's very easy for the viewer to fall in love with her. And I think that they make her in such a way that whether you're a male who's attracted to just, her presence, or if you're a female who can still find her character as not being sort of a diminishment of womanhood. She plays a character who has agency. She plays a character who exercises her own agency a couple of times, whether that's because she needs to or she wants to, I'm not sure. And I don't know that the movie particularly cares, but a lot of this, as far as a film goes, translates.
This is an adult Disney film, a movie that was put out to a generation of people that were raised on child Disney films. She is an adult Disney princess.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. Wow.
And the script says as much. She has this
Cinderella
dream about being a princess and being rescued. But you're not wrong. I mean, the film itself, to kind of zoom out a little bit, the film itself does play out like a Cinderella story, but in a lot of those kind of Disney tropes kind of ways.
Maybe we should take a step back for the 6 people that are listening to this podcast that may not have ever seen Pretty Woman, and explain what is problematic about it.
Yeah. I mean, where to start, right? in this 1990 movie. By the way, this was the most 1980s a 1990 movie could possibly be.
Yeah.
They go to a nightclub that looks like the same kind of place that the Foot Clan hangs out in.
100%.
There's like,
and Red Hot Chili Peppers is playing the one good song that they ever cut, Taste the Pain. Yeah. It's so good.
I like that. Look at you already teeing up the beloved contrarian going on right there, taking shots at the Chili Peppers, even in the main review. Good for you. But yeah, so what we have here is Julia Roberts, who is playing a prostitute that gets picked up off the streets.
Literally.
By just dumb luck.
Yeah.
By Richard Gere, who, let's be honest, there is definitely a version of this movie where Richard Gere is a serial killer.
Oh, for sure. And I'm not sure if you remember, but at the very beginning of this movie, there is a dead prostitute that they pull out of a dumpster.
Yes.
And Hank Azaria makes a small cameo role as a police officer. And it's played for laughs.
They dispense with that immediately.
Yeah.
It's like Deus Ex hooker in a dumpster, because it's the thing that kind of sets her off on this path that, like, gee, maybe walking the streets is dangerous and they ought to find something a little bit more settled down, like taking up with a billionaire who seems to only get more rich as the movie goes on. At the beginning, you really get the impression that he is well-to-do. And then by the end, it's like he can buy and sell nations. It's a little ridiculous the way that there's just no upper limit on this guy's cash. They spend a night together. Richard Gere offers her $3,000 whole to spend the entire week with him.
I did some sort of calculation because I was curious what it was in modern dollars. And it's actually like $7,500 in modern dollars. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, well, it's about $1,000, $1,200. And, and I was like, would I? Maybe. So.
Your tone is very telling here, sir. You're like, I would take my clothes off for Richard Gere for 1 week for that amount of money. That's what you just were telling us.
I would buy Richard Gere a tie and just wear that alone.
And there's so much about this movie that while it has this reputation for being a romantic comedy, there are some horny parts of Pretty Woman. I gotta tell you. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, but yeah, man, you have got to be pretty fucking rich to consequence-free bang a hooker on top of a hotel piano.
Yeah, that was something. I mean, he just tells everybody to leave the room and they do.
Yeah.
That scene, if you look on Letterboxd, is so often mentioned with incredible reverence. People really get turned on by that thing.
And I get why. For everybody involved here, right? Like, Julia Roberts is just undeniable in that moment. And even Richard Gere, I was like, I'd lay down on a piano for that guy. What do you want me to tell you? I guess I know why this movie made $400 billion or whatever the hell it was. My hippocampus is sitting there telling me that this is wrong-headed and problematic and really kind of all around objectionable on a number of fronts. And then the amygdala part of my brain, which is the lizard part of my brain, is enjoying this emotional romp that is happening in front of me. And I know that both things are happening at the same time, and I can't really deny either one of them, because while this film is a mess for a lot of 2024 social reasons, this is also a movie that works as a romance if you allow yourself to get over that bit of things. And it's not an accident that audiences responded so strongly to this particular film. Now, is it a Mike Merrigan favorite? Is it something that I'm going to keep watching for the rest of my life? No, it's not necessarily my barrel of whiskey, but I absolutely can see why audiences responded to it in that way. And so whether it was a matter of audiences in 1990 not really being as cognizant of why it's so problematic as we might be today, I don't know. So again, it both works and doesn't work.
I think that the way that they talk about sex workers in this thing is so antiquated, and so it's so much the way hypocrites talk about things they're not supposed to like. The way that people go to Vegas and they do all kinds of outrageous shit, and then they return to their lives and they act like they're perfect, God-fearing suburbanites.
Whether you intended it or not, Jay, everything that is old is new again, because when this movie was made, fine, but here we are now. We are having a whole new conversation about this because we are in an age of OnlyFans and cam girls, and this time when women have found a way to sort of
take agency over their sexuality,
over sex work, right? And have found a way to, sort of reclaim their power over their own sexuality. And so we're having a conversation sort of culturally about whether we accept or don't accept that kind of thing. There are people that have lost professional jobs because they have an OnlyFans account in their private life. There's a real conversation to be had here. And so I think while it's easy to kind of knee-jerk reaction and say, well, she's a prostitute and that's a bad thing, maybe for reasons that are unhealthy for a person to be a prostitute on the street, that's a fair thing to say. But I think we have a very different conversation about sex workers now than we would have in 1990, when you're absolutely right. The word is demeaning. They are just flat out demeaning to this character the whole way. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that all of a sudden people have stopped being demeaning to women or to sex workers. That's not the case.
For sure, that is not the case.
It is still a conversation, but this guy is supposed to be the hero of our movie. The big love interest, the white knight.
Right.
And you're right. He's just an asshole the whole time. And let's not forget that for all the romance in this movie, for all the love and all the connection, Richard Gere still pays her to whack his weed in the first 3 hours that they know each other.
Yeah.
It is not like this romance where it kind of went unrequited. I would have felt differently about this movie, and I felt very let down by the fact that they engaged in sex together throughout the movie. Because if this had been a movie where he had paid for her time and they were a companion and there wasn't any of that, and then in the end they fell in love and consummated that love, I would have felt differently about that.
But they did because of the kissing.
Yeah,
they tried to get that out with the screenplay, and they tried to go down this road where intimacy meant love and sex meant nothing.
And I don't know, maybe there's a conversation to be had about whether or not he's condemnable for soliciting a sex worker.
I don't know if that's actually a conversation that needs to be had, because it is the world's oldest profession. And I don't necessarily think that it's the worst thing as long as there aren't victims at the center of it.
That's right. Yeah, sure.
But that said, he's a douchebag because of the way he treats women and the way he talks to women. And you get that in the first moments that he's introduced at the party at an even shittier character's friend house. That is the guy that's played by Jason Alexander.
Oh, I was so surprised in the opening scenes of this movie to see Jason Alexander. I was so thrilled about that.
Yeah, and he's playing the same role that he always plays, except even more reprehensible, even more capitalist.
He's a slimy early 90s lawyer.
He
That's
is.
what he is. Yeah, that's his role.
And Gere is just so fucking self-satisfied all the time. He was throwing off these major Peter Baelish from Game of Thrones vibes. Like, I want a remake with Aidan Gillen as Edward and Millie Bobby Brown as Vivian. You know what I mean? Like something like that.
Yeah.
And I want to put that in modern times and see how that shit plays out. Would this movie change at all?
I don't know that it would be a lot different. I think that we would see perhaps some different takes on what a sex work relationship might look like now.
Yeah.
It could certainly exist more in a virtual space, and
Sure.
there might be some interesting things to come from that. But I think that there is a version of this movie that you could make today, but I don't know who's buying it, because I don't think that audiences would tolerate a movie about this in the same way that they would have in 1990, and probably for very good reason. And I don't want to turn this podcast into like a big political discussion. People know how you and I feel about these kind of topics.
Fairly evident.
Right?
Yeah.
But this movie pretends like it has something to say about capitalism. And there's a conversation to be had about that today. What is kind of gross is that this movie was made in 1990.
Yeah.
And it feels like we're sort of reliving a 1990 moment, right?
We really are.
Like
1988, actually. We're in the thick of They Live.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And so we're living in kind of this regressive time when we are celebrating excess and demeaning behavior, where we are rewarding people for treating other people as they are lower than them. The whole thing is kind of gross. And I don't know how much of that was your intent in picking
it was
Pretty Woman.
100% my intent.
Well, then you kind of nailed it, because we could have talked about, as a film, what about this doesn't work for me? What about this doesn't make for a great film? But I don't know that my criticisms exist in that space, because I think for what they're supposed to be, these are good performances. I think Gary Marshall puts together a heck of a film out of what was almost no script. And so it works, I think, as a romantic comedy
It does.
in the year 1990.
But it's important to talk about J.F. Lawton, the writer of Pretty Woman, who was struggling at the time. He's worked a little bit with our old friend Charles Band.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And he writes this script called 3000. It gets picked up by the Sundance Institute and then gets the attention of Disney, who then takes it under their Touchstone banner and creates this huge film that grosses enormous amounts of money. Lawton then gets work. He starts to get work, and he writes your beloved Under Siege and Under Siege 2 Dark Territory.
Yeah. This guy's career honestly could just be its own podcast.
Oh, it
because
is wild.
Between Under Siege 2, and I also think he did Chain Reaction.
He did.
That Keanu Reeves is maybe a scientist.
Yeah, with Morgan Freeman.
That's right. And some really baffling stuff in the middle along the way.
Did you see what
he
show he created?
No.
He created a show with Pamela Anderson called VIP in the late 90s.
No way.
Yeah,
VIP?
way. VIP.
I mean,
yeah.
A Pamela Anderson show from the late 90s? Never heard of it. says 16-year-old Mike Merrigan.
All I want to say to our listeners is that they need to watch the first episode. It's on YouTube, and it has an incredibly early acting role from not one, but two of the leads from Breaking Bad. Bryan Cranston and Dean Norris. Cranston gets to tussle with a softcore phenomenon named Ambert Smith, and Norris gets to pose with a machine gun while playing a mercenary.
Okay, hear me out. New podcast idea. There's 88 episodes, VIP, season by season, episode by episode. Maybe it's just we start dropping it in the off weeks. That's it.
We start a Patreon.
Yeah.
If people want VIP content.
VIP content is us reviewing the show
Literally talking
VIP
about the show.
episode by episode.
Yes,
All right.
exactly.
Well, if that's something you're interested in, you know how to reach us. Jay@filmjitsu.net, Mike@filmjitsu.net. Let us know if you want to send us money to make that happen, because if you want to talk about selling yourself for money, that is absolutely something we are comfortable doing.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Mike, as I am by all rights likely the most contrarian of contrarians, this bottom 5 is basically my sweet spot.
Oh, it sure is.
A gallery of largely adored and praised films that, when they're allotted in my company, induce the kind of comedic apoplexy that you, more than almost anyone in my life, love to watch.
Oh, sir, I'll tell you how I'm approaching this. I am pouring myself a drink and I'm going to sit back and watch Santo Gomez work because, man, you love being a contrarian, but not just because it's the shtick that you do for attention.
Nope.
You just aren't afraid to swim upstream.
Yeah.
You know who you are, you know what you like, and you're not going to sort of compromise that if it's not a popular opinion. And you get a kick out of finding beloved things, telling people that you don't love them, and then fighting with them for persecuting you for not liking the thing you told them you don't like. And I couldn't love this about you anymore. And so I'm sure that for this bottom 5, I'm just counting on you to bring the heat, and I'm going to try to keep up.
So, with all that said, we're going to start out with my number 5, and that's going to be an incendiary pick, as all of these will be, I suspect. Bride of Frankenstein from 1935.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, really? Yeah. Honestly,
okay.
It's boring. It's just so incredibly boring.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk about how terrific Boris Karloff is as the monster, and how off the wall bonkers Colin Clive gets as Dr. Frankenstein. But as a sequel to the original story, it opens up a mythology in a totally unnecessary way, and it betrays the tragic nature of the monster by immediately having him kill the father of the young girl the monster accidentally killed in the first movie.
Yeah, right.
This is in the opening moments of what is allegedly Shelley's next chapter of the tale.
Uh-huh.
And it got a resounding nope from me, a guy who adores the original text. And I love the monster's sad banishment to the frozen climes at the end of that.
Yeah, yeah.
So, look, I know I am beyond on the outside of this one. It's has an insanely fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes with 98% of 51 critics' reviews being positive and an average rating of 9 out of 10. I found it unnecessary. And it was one of those things where it's like, only this time it's a lady, which left me feeling really cold.
What about, as a filmmaker, appreciation for it as
like all of the German expressionist sort of vibe and whatever else.
How do you what do you think about that?
There are some great things about this movie. I'm not going to say that there aren't. The bride's reanimation and Elsie Lancaster's portrayal of disgust when she sees the monster for the first time, that's terrific. Yeah. But the film is incredibly slowly paced. And that introduction of the very flamboyant Pretorius, while it's a fun icon for queer cinema, it's a lazy piece of writing. Like, oh, wait, it's not Henry Frankenstein's fault this time. It's his mentors. It's just... And I think I have to place this in context for when I saw it, which is why I put it at my number 5.
Yep.
I saw this in film school in a small viewing booth that they set aside for student use. And I was working full time and carrying a full course load when I watched this film. So it may have had to do with the fact that I fell asleep while sitting up due to the slowness of the story.
Yeah.
You'd think at 75 minutes I could have managed to avert shut-eye. I just couldn't figure out how it can be a classic and not be engaging enough to keep someone awake.
Yeah. Wow. You know what? Totally fair pick, and interesting kind of a tie back to our Pretty Woman main review, because I think what can happen sometimes with these beloved films is if there is sort of a classic film that we have been late to catch up on, we spend our whole lives hearing about what a classic
for
it
sure.
is and how amazing it is and so expectations are sky high.
Yeah.
And then when you watch a movie that sometimes couldn't possibly meet those lofty expectations, you're just left feeling let down. I might even have an example of that in my bottom five. So I think that's a really great kind of pathway into feeling let down by a beloved film.
Sure. Well, what is your number 5?
You know, maybe you're not the only one that's ready to get a little incendiary around here, because boy, oh boy, right now am I hearing about it. We're hot off the heels of Thanksgiving, and I have a pretty unpopular opinion, which is that I don't think that Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is all that funny. It just isn't for me.
Wow.
Then you can give me a fucking automobile, a fucking Datsun, a fucking Toyota, a fucking Mustang, a fucking Buick, 4 fucking wheels and a seat.
I really don't care for the way you're speaking to me.
And I really don't care for the way your company left me in the middle of fucking nowhere with fucking keys to a fucking car that isn't fucking there.
It's good. I like it well enough, but I wouldn't put it anywhere near a list of my favorite comedies. And I know people that would try to run me over with Planes, Trains, and Automobiles for even daring to suggest that a John Candy movie isn't that funny. And in truth, John Candy's not the problem. I love John Candy. I remember the day he died. I was sleeping over at my friend Chris's house. Chris is probably my oldest friend. He's a listener of the show. Shout out to that guy. He might be the only one. When we get a download in New York City, we can probably count on that being Chris. And on the day John Candy died, I was sleeping over his house, and his little sister, who was probably 5 at the time, was just absolutely inconsolable at this news of John Candy having died. And so for that reason, it's kind of always imprinted in my brain. But the real problem for me is I'm not really a Steve Martin guy.
I know. You do not like him. And I'm a huge fan. So
I like him on a talk show. I think Only Murders in the Building, just sometimes the characters that he plays just don't hit for me. And so for some people, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is an annual holiday tradition. For me, I'd be fine to never see it again.
Wow. Well, hell, there we go. Well, you're not going to mind when I talk about my number 4 then, which is of course, Top Gun.
You son of a
It's
bitch.
boring.
I revisited this movie after Top Gun Maverick, and you know what? It slaps. It still slaps.
It doesn't slap in the slightest. It's
oh my
boring.
God.
It's filled with posturing and cookie cutter characters. Did James Tolkien ever play anything other than the disgusted bald guy in Power?
No. Who cares? It's Top Gun.
I want to tell you, I love Tom Skerritt, Berlin, and glossy shots of sunrises and sunsets. But even Val Kilmer doing his little rolling quarter trick cannot make me give a single fuck about whatever the hell it is that Tom Cruise's character has to prove. Because I'm supposed to be rooting for one pilot over another because one doesn't follow rules. What the fuck ever?
Santo, you're the Maverick of this podcast. We just got done talking about how you're the contrarian who's not afraid to break all those rules. And now you're yelling at this guy for breaking all the rules.
This movie seems senseless and all about the male ego. In particular, white male ego, where the already entitled feel victimized because there are fucking rules to be followed in life. I found Maverick almost thoroughly unlikable, besides that good deed that he pulls at the start of the film, which was good, and the treatment of that guy's trauma was decent.
His friend Goose dies in a tragic accident.
Anthony Edwards, who, by the way, I love from Revenge of the Nerds.
Let me tell you something. This is a true thing that happens in my life. My brother Christopher goes out hunting. My brother likes to hunt for
goose,
pheasant, and geese. Yes. He has a hunting dog that he has trained. He named this dog
Please don't.
Goose.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
And when they go out hunting,
Yeah.
when they're sitting crouched in the bushes waiting for the animals, my brother will say, "Talk to me, Goose."
Oh, for fuck's sake.
And what is better than that?
Everything.
What could be better than that?
What's your
So,
number?
I don't know.
What's your number 4?
Oh my God, you're a real son of a bitch. You know what? I'm not going to do one better here because I'm going to tell you I'm sort of almost actually about to commit the same crime you just did. Among a certain subset of movie watchers, saying you don't like Rocky will get you a punch in the face.
Yeah. No,
Well,
it will.
I'm ready to put in a mouth guard because I don't like Rocky.
Really? Huh.
Yeah, it feels long. We're asked to believe that Stallone can act his way out of a greasy meatball sandwich wrapper. He can't.
He can.
No, not in this, though. And no one ever talks about this because the plot mechanics are so foolish. I'm supposed to believe that the world heavyweight champion bypasses every ranked boxer on the planet to pluck this nobody out of Philadelphia for a title shot.
Well, it's a publicity stunt.
Yeah, no, okay, fine.
It's the kind of thing that would happen nowadays. Look at Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, no. I don't like it when a drama forces me to ignore how stupid its central premise is.
Fair enough.
I think the whole runtime is just this emotionally manipulative story meant to drive you towards this one big underdog moment of glory, and that isn't worth it to me.
Well, it's not glory. He loses.
Yeah, but it's this big redemption. Like, he's got the thing.
He made the fight. And he made it through.
Yeah.
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 It's what Tyson did against Paul.
Yeah, and exactly. And we saw how that went.
Yeah.
The whole thing is almost as dumb to me as the city of Philadelphia erecting a statue to a fictional athlete.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
I know there's a lot of dads out there that are ready to take away my man card, but you know what? Come and get it. I think Rocky sucks, and I'm the only one man enough to admit it.
Wow.
Oscar-winning picture, by the way. Yeah,
I know, but that doesn't mean anything, as we've clearly been able to tell on our podcast, especially with my number 3, which won several Oscars after being nominated for 10. And that would be 1917 by director Sam Mendes. Look, a filmmaking friend of mine from back in the day, his name is Brad Sykes, once said to me that he hated long takes that overused Steadicam and that he didn't consider scenes using them as, quote, directed. I didn't entirely agree with him because I often felt that the blocking and flexible lighting setups that were required to preserve the illusion of open space, I felt that that was indicative of the kind of logistics that tracking or dolly shots require. You know, whether you're on tracks or handheld with a Steadicam, the shots need to go together in the edit, and that's directing.
Yeah.
But here, director Sam Mendes, who, by the way, also helmed another beloved movie I cannot stand, American Beauty.
I'm not sure that's so beloved anymore, but you're not wrong.
But it was. It certainly was. Yeah. Well, anyway, he hangs his hat on this entire film that's not only primarily shot with Steadicam, but also hides the seams using CG. And the effect is a film that is supposed to ratchet up tension by allowing viewers an unbroken, close vantage point to the relentless gauntlet that's faced by the lead character, William Schofield, as he attempts to deliver a message telling another regiment to stand down or else lots of people are going to die. It is totally a compelling premise, but the gimmick distracts, and the gee whiz factor of it all, even with the expert eye of legendary cinematographer Roger Deakins behind the camera, who's best known for his work with the Coen brothers and Denis Villeneuve, it all comes off as way too staged and choreographed. So one of my favorite directors is Jeremy Saulnier, and he's explained that he tries to capture the real-life awkwardness of violence.
Yeah.
And he had to often tell his fight coordinators on Rebel Ridge to make things look less cool so the audience wouldn't be pulled out of the moment. For me, in 1917, there's no denying there's some pretty incredible technical wizardry at work.
Sure.
But all of it feels artificial. A few years prior, Christopher Nolan helmed Dunkirk. which is forever etched into my mind as a foil to 1917.
Yeah, I think a lot of people share that.
Okay. Nolan's direction and choice of shots is precise, but it doesn't feel overly staged. Maybe it was a victim of expectations for me, but when Schofield makes his run through the various set pieces, it feels just like that, as if he's actor George McKay running through staged and choreographed scenes that feel way too perfectly timed. So that is why at my number 3, it is 1917.
The one thing I guess I'm going to ask, I think everything you said is fair.
Okay.
I was just curious about sort of where you place this in the idea of beloved, because I guess it doesn't quite match for me the way that some of the other things we've talked about.
Holy shit, dude. This movie is beloved. Maybe it needs more time. Maybe it just needs more time. But I'm telling you right now, that movie is, people fucking love it.
Well, that's a good segue for me into my number 3, because I do think my number 3 is a movie that is very clearly defined as beloved by audiences because it's been around for a lot longer.
Oh.
I'm picking on another comedy, and for similar reasons to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, I just don't think it's very funny. My number 3 is The Blues Brothers.
Okay. All right. Okay. Hold on. This is like when you almost kicked Ghostbusters and Pick 2, Kick 2, except this is worse. I'm having I think I'm having a heart attack.
All right. That's good.
Mike, are you fucking for real?
Yeah, I'm for real. Because this might be your Bride of Frankenstein situation, because this was a movie that for years before I saw it, it made all these lists of great American comedies. It had the reputation as one of the greats.
This bottom 5 is backfiring.
But then I saw the movie, and I don't really think I found a legitimate chuckle in the bunch.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
The movie belongs as a 3-minute long Saturday Night Live sketch, because that's definitely about enough meat on the bones for a feature-length film. And I can tell you that a lot of that is Dan Aykroyd, who I've been clear on this show that I just don't think is that funny.
You are fucking ridiculous.
I'm not sure the man has ever made me laugh. Yes, even in Ghostbusters, another film that I don't revere the way that people do. I love Ghostbusters, but I don't love it the way that you love it. And maybe it's lazy to go with another comedy for similar reasons to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, but this is a personal list. And if I'm honest, take me out back and flog me if you need to, but I just don't much like The Blues Brothers.
Oh my God.
Comedy is one of those things. I actually almost imposed a rule.
It's not just a comedy. It's a musical.
Okay.
And it's not a musical in the conventional sense. It's a musical with incredible, energetic, fierce musical numbers that are just wonderful and spontaneous.
That's true. They're not funny.
The Penguin, Ray Charles, the scene, oh my God, the scene at the restaurant. Sir, the fact that you don't like it makes me feel like you don't like me.
No, you're funnier than the Blues Brothers.
I am actually broken.
Well, I still have a couple picks left, so give me time.
I don't think I can go on with this list.
This whole concept was a real fuck up. Because here's what we've done is we're like, hey, is there anybody listening to this podcast? Well, we're going to completely delegitimize ourselves as film fans. And now nobody's going to want to listen to us ever. So that's great. Rocky, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, The Blues Brothers. I'm really doing great.
You are much more hitting the notes. I must say. Okay. Well, my number 2 is a incredibly loved film, Night of the Hunter from 1955. To say that you don't like Night of the Hunter puts you in like a subterranean level of film appreciation.
Yeah.
So many people applaud this movie as a frightening mood piece, a standout from actor, playwright turned director Charles Laughton, who unfortunately only made this single film. Robert Mitchum is a serial killer that poses as a preacher and threatens 2 children so he can find their father's money, has moments of true intensity, but he doesn't do enough. He isn't scary enough. And in terms of the direction, the movie feels uneven and sort of uncommitted to its story or characters. It is visually interesting, but that sort of visual panache comes at the cost of a loss of tension. Some people, including Roger Ebert, applaud director Laughton's otherworldly touches that leave the film unmoored in a historical time period. But to me, it reduces the stakes of the whole situation. I don't feel particularly frightened for the kids because the dreamlike quality of the film makes me think it's coming from their point of view, sort of recollections of their survival.
Yeah.
In fact, some of the quirky editing and scene design feels fake, like when the kids escape in a boat down the river that's clearly a soundstage. It's a cool visual, but it felt like another in a series of directorial missteps.
Right. Okay.
Laughton took the initial critical reception of the film, a lot of which I personally agree with, deeply to heart, and he opted to never, ever again direct another film. And I think that's a shame because while this movie doesn't work for me, it does show that Laughton was a free-thinking creative artist with a drive to do something different. He shouldn't have given up after one film, but I think the classic status that this picture now holds is way, way too generous. Blasphemy.
A little bit. I mean, I think a lot of the appreciation for this movie has to do with that for 1955, it was doing some pretty audacious stuff.
I just don't agree.
Taking Robert Mitchum, who was a very different kind of character for his whole career, and turning him into this character.
Didn't Robert Mitchum do this same kind of thing in Cape Fear? He was menacing and scary and frightening in Cape Fear, but he wasn't here for me. I didn't find that intensity here. It was a misdirected kind of film. I felt like a lot of this thing just doesn't play out the way other people credit it for playing out. But hey, you don't like Blues Brothers, so.
That's true. You got me there. I don't. Number 2 for me might be straining the word beloved as I thought about it.
Okay.
But it's certainly a movie that people are way into.
Okay.
The wrong sort for me. There's posters, t-shirts, all kinds of pop culture references. I am going with 1983's Scarface.
Yeah, I'm there with you. We're both there.
I just
me and you
hate this movie.
Same.
I hate the faux gangster culture that it inspired.
Same.
Like, kids from Connecticut with Scarface posters on their dorm walls.
Hell yeah.
Can eat my ass.
Preach.
Not to mention the obviously problematic portrayal of Al Pacino as a Cuban man.
Horrible.
That has aged like a fart in a bottle over the years. But even just that black and white poster gets my blood boiling. It's come to represent this phony gangster lifestyle that dirtbags in small town America have come to adopt, as if like dropping out of high school and smoking weed in your mom's house is anything like becoming a Miami drug lord. All due respect to Brian De Palma, I just can't stand this movie. I kind of can't stand the people who adore this movie. And that's why it's my number 2. I really, really hate the whole vibe of Scarface.
Do you remember in Dumb and Dumber? When Jim Carrey rides up on the scooter and he had traded the car away or whatever.
The shaggin' wagon?
Yeah, the shaggin' wagon.
Yeah.
He had been separated from Jeff Daniels. And Jeff Daniels sees him on this thing and he says, yeah, I traded it for this sweet scooter, right? And Jeff Daniels goes, just when I thought you couldn't do anything dumber.
You go ahead and do something like this.
And completely redeem yourself. Here you are, sir. Completely redeeming yourself.
Good. So we kind of we're a little over this Blues Brothers kerfuffle.
I'm very much over it for your hatred.
Okay.
Yeah. Because hate resonates way more with me. So
yeah, that's true.
Mutual hate, really.
That's good. Yeah, I know how to feed your dark side. That's for sure.
And very connected to your number 2 is my number 1. I really, really hate this one. And like so many of these, quote, anti-hero movies, the messages of Joker
often
birth a Me Too movement among assholes and incels when really the movie is intended to send a different message, as we've discussed in the past with something like Fight Club. Well, I don't know that this movie had a mixed message. Here we have a dude that's pushed and pushed and pushed to the edge by circumstances from so many corners of his life that it seems ludicrous, but that's okay. It's just a comic book movie. Yet at the same moment, they want you to feel sorry for this guy like he's a real human being. And thanks to Joaquin Phoenix giving it his all, many people get so caught up in the sad, pathetic story of the protagonist that they don't mind a damn that he becomes a fucking antagonist. In fact, they cheer him on. They want blood and revenge, totally missing the fact that all of society is so sick that he becomes the sickest of all, and as a result, a savior for all those who feel the world isn't fair.
Boy, does that sure feel ripped from the fucking headlines. Can you imagine a world in which we all side with the fucking psychopath because it makes us feel better about ourselves?
Have you seen what it's like out there, Murray? Do you ever actually leave the studio? Everybody just yells and screams at each other. Nobody's civil anymore. Nobody thinks what it's like to be the other guy. You think men like Thomas Wayne ever think what it's like to be someone like me? To be somebody but themselves? They don't. They think that we'll just sit there and take it like good little boys, that we won't werewolf and go wild.
I had to put up and still have to put up with people slathering effusive praise over this movie. And I'm talking regular people.
Terrible.
I'm not talking
It's
about
terrible.
critics, right? Critics don't love this flick.
Yeah, it's popular out in those streets.
But I'll leave you with this thought. The Rotten Tomatoes score of this thing, 68%, makes it the worst reviewed movie ever nominated for a Best Picture Oscar.
Wow. I love that, actually. We found some common ground here at the ends of our list. I will be really interested to see if we have any common ground at my number one. If anybody was going to ever just write me off entirely for a bottom 5 pick, here we go. Maybe it's just my headspace this time of year. Maybe I don't have a soul. I don't know. But I'm going with a classic American Christmas movie for my number one. Jason,
no.
Is there any movie more universally beloved than It's a Wonderful Life?
Oh my God, Mike.
It's certainly beloved, but is it 2 hours and 10 minutes beloved?
Oh, it is overlong. But
is it Mr. Potter faces absolutely zero comeuppance for being an enormous dickhead beloved? Is it Suicide is a weird fucking plot point for a Christmas movie beloved?
Oof.
For me, this movie is mouthful after mouthful of phony American sentimentality that I've been conditioned to love through some kind of Yuletide exposure therapy. And when I take a step back, all of those aforementioned things don't add up to a movie that I genuinely enjoy. They add up to a movie that is telegraphing to me in every way that I'm supposed to like it. Unless I'm some kind of soulless ghoul, I'm expected to like it. And if I'm a good red-blooded American, then I'm obligated to like it. And that's just it. This movie feels like an obligation to me. It's like Christmas time homework, where I just have to drink the medicine and tell everyone it warms my heart all the way down, when instead for me, it plays as an overly sentimental nostalgia for small town America that never really existed. And maybe this is inflammatory. Maybe I'm a raw nerve, but for me, this movie kind of has a place in our culture where it's like, make Christmas great again. And I'm just not here for it.
I haven't seen it in years. And I'll tell you, every argument that you made, I understand. And it felt a little bit like you were Morpheus giving me the red pill. I feel a little bit awakened. You're John Nada and I'm putting on the glasses. I do feel as though you make some really good points here. Unlike your Blues Brothers argument, which is just basically, I don't like Dan Aykroyd.
I'm never going to hear the end of this.
I think that what you say about It's a Wonderful Life resonates, but you make me want to watch it again, but with those thoughts in my head. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate you.
Aw, shucks. Every time a Santo appreciates me, an angel gets its wings.
So, Mike, as we're coming up on the end of the year, I thought it might be nice to take a quick moment and mention, and even maybe hear from, a few listeners of the show.
Wait, do we have listeners? Is this just messages we've left each other?
This probably would have been a better thing to do on our true year-end award show. But honestly, we have so much going on during that hour that I'm thinking it's better to just give some space here to fans who I'm tempted to call Ejits.
Oh, no.
No, but I won't because that's dumb.
Yeah, Jidiots works for me, actually.
Oh, that's even better.
I like it.
Look, I'm going to talk about a guy that I know you love probably more than anyone in this world, even me, and that's Nick Phaneuf. He's among our closest friends, and he's been a longtime listener of the show, dating back to the early days when you hosted with John.
Mm-hmm.
He's an extraordinarily talented musician and sound guy, and he's acted as an occasional producer of the show, offering technical and editing advice, and he's actually, spliced a few of our episodes together himself.
Yeah, we got to think about getting him to do that again. Shit, we are falling behind.
Well, I would say his greatest contributions have been some of those musical bumpers that we use, specifically in our special holiday shows. So anyhow, when he's not arguing with me in our Apple Podcast reviews, which, no, seriously, you have to have a look because he does. Nick occasionally will voice an opinion on things. And when we did our Hardcore Henry episode, he spotted a glaring omission in our bottom 5.
Hey, Jay and Mike, this is Nick in the Shire, calling to weigh in on the bottom 5 birthdays. Although I thought both of your lists were excellent, there was one that I was really expecting to hear and was disappointed it was left off. And that is the Brazilian birthday party in the movie Signs. Although it lasts only a few moments, it still haunts my dreams.
Yeah.
And that, for me, makes it a bottom 5 birthday.
Oh, man. Did we fuck that one up?
Yeah, leave it to my fucking best friend to call me up on the podcast, be smarter than me, and have better audio than I do. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
It's so true.
Damn it. He's 100% right. How is that not on those lists?
I don't know, man. But here it is. So we've given it the airtime. I think we're acknowledging that he is absolutely right. It should have been on the list. And we're going to move on to the next one in our mailbag. This is a wild message, and it's one of dozens and dozens from who I'd call probably our number one fan, a woman that goes by the moniker Your Pal Erin. Erin loves to give us lots of responses and anecdotes as reactions to our episodes.
It's wonderful.
So here's one where she honestly comes up with one of the best ideas ever after listening to you describe your feelings about 9 Lives.
Sorry, I had to pull over. When Mike says so much endless fucking meowing, I suddenly see a visual of like the Film Jitsu review. You know, like the quotes that end up like in the ads for the movies. I think that Film Jitsu, like, y'all need to do that. You need to do like a movie quote page where you take a quote from each of your episodes, or take your quotes from each of your episodes and put them up as if you were reviewers on the movie when it actually came out. Holy shitballs.
I love the idea personally of us taking the movie posters and putting our quotes on them.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
It is
like
so good.
For this one, you'd have to be pretty rich to consequence-free bang a hooker on a hotel piano.
Exactly.
Wow, that's really good.
Yeah,
that's really good.
It is.
Erin has been so generous since the show has been out with her praise for the podcast, and she shares every episode.
She's awesome.
Quotes us all the time. She's been such a great and fun supporter. We get a lot of messages from Erin that we enjoy, but this is, I think, the first time we've been able to share one on an episode. So absolutely keep that coming, because that's good stuff.
Finally, in our mailbag, we've got this doozy from new listener Max, who is eager to discuss only something that a guy like me might find intriguing: the Odette Springer song Secret Sanctuary, which made my list for bottom 5 songs.
Okay.
Max writes, I stumbled upon your podcast by accident while searching for older movies, specifically your episode 24 podcast. I enjoyed the banter between you guys talking about old movies, and now look forward to checking out more of your podcast. I know you guys listed Odette Springer's Secret Sanctuary as one of the worst songs ever, so I'm slightly embarrassed to ask if you guys have a full copy of the song, and if you're willing to send me a copy. I agree that Odette Springer is not a very good singer, but I think the song itself isn't so terrible and has potential, especially if sung by someone more competent. Why do I think Max is going to release a version of this somehow?
Yeah, I kind of like, this is like a Nigerian prince scam, I think, where he's like, if you could just send me a laptop. I love this.
This is how I know it's not. BTW, I can't believe Jay used to run Cheese Grater. It was the site where I found the song. I used the website from time to time back in the day.
No way. What is going on in Max's world that he independently stumbled into 2 dumb movie projects like Cheese Grater and this podcast? What is happening?
I think it says a lot about what we do.
Jason, our next episode is our holiday special.
Indeed.
You hate it when I do this, but I keep doing this. Holidays are coming. We're having episodes based on holidays. That's just how it's going to go. And for Christmas this year, we decided to do another episode of Film Jitsu Goes to the Theater, because when I saw the trailer for Red One with The Rock and Chris Evans rescuing a kidnapped Santa Claus,
played by J.K. Simmons,
and I think there's a cramp, I was like, is this a goof? Is this movie being made so that we'll make a Film Jitsu episode about it? Apparently not. Also, one of the things that I have been really secretly enjoying up until this moment and haven't told you about is that you continue to call this movie the wrong thing. You keep calling it Code Red, which is that's a Mountain Dew flavor, which I think it's Mountain Dew and like isopropyl alcohol mixed together, that fucking red trash that is Code Red. You keep calling this movie Code Red. It is actually called Code One, starring
Red
Dwayne
One.
The Rock Johnson.
You just called
whatever
it the
fuck
wrong
it's
thing.
called. Yeah, who knows what it is? I don't know what it is. This movie's bullshit, and we're gonna go see it for money. This is who's selling themselves now, pretty woman. We are going to pay money for a trip to see Red One at the theater for our holiday episode. And to go along with that, we have decided that we are going to do our bottom 5 secret organizations.
That's right.
Because that seems to be a part of what this movie is about. The secret organization that is responsible for protecting Santa Claus. Is this like In the Line of Fire, but Santa Claus? I don't fucking know. I'm really not looking forward to spending the money to see it, but that's what we're going to do.
But until then, we've been your hosts. I'm Jay.
And I'm the Krampus.
We'll see you next time. What the fuck?
Stalno mislim na te, hoću znat sve karte, vježbat ću sate i sate. Karate, karate, vježbat ću dok zadnji mi kjaj, zostane izađe.
There was just so much Richard Gere nipples in this. Did you?
There was, yeah. Yep, there was a lot of Richard Gere nipples. I don't know if there's a drinking game to be had there. I think who knew that in the year 2024 we could have invented something new, the Richard Gere nipple drinking game. You're welcome, everyone at home.